A rescue team responding to a 911 call found an elderly man trapped in his attic by rising water. He had broken through the ceiling with a crowbar and waited for 18 hours with a flashlight and a transistor radio. They heard the tapping from the boat, he said. He was dehydrated but otherwise fine. They were angels, he said of the crew. As students and staff were being evacuated from the local high school, a massive gust tore off the gymnasium roof, sending metal panels flying across the parking lot. Surveillance footage shows teachers herding children out just moments before collapse. "We had 20 seconds, maybe less," said Principal Harris. No one was injured, though several cars were crushed by falling debris. Officials say the storm's wind speeds exceeded 120 miles per hour. The gym, built in the 1960s, was not rated for such conditions. Classes remained suspended. "We were lucky," Harris added. "That wind came for blood." When the winds ripped the roof from their small home, Ana Martinez had only seconds to react. She threw a mattress over her two young sons and laid across it as debris slammed into the walls and shattered glass flew. It sounded like a freight train crashing through the sky, she said. For nearly an hour, she held still, praying the house wouldn't collapse. The family was later found shaken but unharmed. The house was destroyed, except for the bedroom where they hid. She saved their lives, one responder said. Pure instinct and courage. A group of 5 hikers who had set out before the storm were reported overdue when families lost contact. Their last known location was near a backcountry trail in the national forest. Heavy winds toppled trees and blocked access roads. Rescue teams located their abandoned campsite but found no sign of the hikers. A coordinated search is underway with drones, dogs, and volunteers. After the storm cleared, dozens of residents posted photos of found items to help neighbors reconnect with lost property. One family was shocked to see their trampoline wedged high in a pine tree 2 streets over, despite having tied it down. It looked like a nest for giant birds, the father said. The trampoline frame was twisted, but mostly intact. With help from a tree service, they managed to recover it. Next time, he laughed, I'm chaining it to the car. Officials continue to warn that unsecured backyard items can become deadly projectiles in hurricane winds. A man's entire roof was torn off in a single gust. But what stunned neighbors most was that it landed upright, perfectly intact, 2 houses down. It was like a hat blown off someone's head, one witness said. No one was hurt, though the home is now considered structurally unsafe. Insurance adjusters called it an extremely rare wind pattern event. The homeowner joked, if anyone needs a roof, I've got a spare. Moments before a violent gust lifted their camper off the ground, 9-year-old Tyler was yanked out by his older sister, who heard the structure creaking. I don't know why, but I just grabbed him and ran, she said. Seconds later, the wind tossed the camper 50 feet across a field, smashing it into trees. The family had ignored evacuation orders, thinking the storm wouldn't hit hard. Officials say the siblings narrowly avoided tragedy. If she had waited even 5 seconds more, a firefighter said, we'd be telling a different story. First responders were stunned to find an SUV lodged halfway into the second floor balcony of an apartment complex. According to witnesses, the parked vehicle was lifted by extreme winds during the hurricane's peak and hurled across a 40-foot embankment. No one was inside the SUV, and the residents of the affected apartment were unharmed. "I thought it was a bomb going off," said one tenant. Engineers say wind acceleration between nearby buildings likely created a tunnel effect. "It wasn't just strong wind. It was focused, violent wind," said a structural analyst on scene. A 30-foot metal billboard was torn from its supports and hurled through the second-story window of a downtown apartment complex. Miraculously, no one was in the room when it hit. The wind-carried structure demolished furniture, shattered glass, and embedded part of itself into the opposite wall. "It sounded like a bomb went off," said a neighbor. Fire officials said if the impact had happened an hour earlier, during a birthday party in the same unit, there would have been fatalities. The billboard's remains were later found 4 blocks away. An old man stood in the ruins of his workshop, running his hands over rusted tools he'd once polished every week. The wind had knocked down one wall, but left the other 3 standing, like a set on a stage. He didn't speak much as neighbors offered help. Instead, he swept sawdust from the floor, straightened a stool, and set a bent hammer carefully on the bench. "It's not gone," he finally said. "Just quieter now."
A storm rips the roof off a shed with the owner still on top of it. Besides a couple of bruises, he was completely fine.
An estimated 12 million tons of debris now cover the affected coastal region. Everything from drywall to rooftops to boats thrown inland lies in chaotic piles across roads and lawns. Landfills are overwhelmed. Officials plan to open temporary dump sites and have called in National Guard units to assist with logistics. Cleanup costs could exceed $500 million. The storm was an hour long. The cleanup may take a year, said a federal disaster response coordinator. During peak gusts, Harold Grant stepped outside to check on his generator and was lifted off his feet by hurricane winds. He landed 30 feet away in a muddy ditch, stunned but alive. "It felt like a hand just picked me up and dropped me," he said. He suffered bruises and a fractured wrist, but managed to crawl back inside his home before the next wave of wind hit. Emergency crews later found trees snapped like twigs in his yard. "I'll never take wind warnings lightly again," Grant said from his hospital bed, smiling weakly. A 9-year-old boy separated from his parents during evacuation was found safe at a shelter 60 miles away. Volunteers shared his photo online, and it was seen by a cousin who contacted officials. Reunification took 2 days. "He was scared, but okay," said a nurse at the shelter. Over 200 children were temporarily unaccompanied in the days following the storm. In the early hours after the hurricane made landfall, 62-year-old Marvin Ellis carried his paralyzed neighbor 2 miles through waist-high floodwaters to reach a rescue point. With no cell service and streets submerged, Ellis wrapped the man in plastic sheeting, tied him to his back with extension cords, and waded through swirling debris. "I couldn't leave him. He's family," Ellis said. Both were treated for exhaustion and exposure. Paramedics say their survival came down to Ellis's strength, calm thinking, and deep sense of duty. "He saved my life," the neighbor whispered from his hospital bed. After the storm passed, silence fell so suddenly it felt wrong. Everything that once made sound, birds, cars, wind chimes, was gone or broken. James stood barefoot in the wet grass, staring at the sky. His house had lost half its roof, and a pine tree lay across his porch. But all he could think about was how quiet the world had become. "It felt like the wind stole the noise," he later told a neighbor. That night, he slept on a mattress in the garage, listening for anything to return. When the winds began tearing shingles from roofs, 68-year-old Lester Jennings ran outside to retrieve his garbage bins. A sudden gust knocked him off his feet and sent him sliding across his lawn. He grabbed onto the metal base of his mailbox and held on as the wind roared over him. "I thought I'd be blown into the next county," he said. When the storm passed, he was soaked, bruised, but alive. His mailbox was bent and his house badly damaged, but Jennings credits that metal post for saving his life. "Strongest thing I ever installed," he joked. Responders searching a flooded street found a 2-year-old girl sitting on a floating couch, soaked but alive, her arms wrapped tightly around the family dog. No adults were nearby. The home had been destroyed hours earlier, and it's believed the rising water lifted the furniture to safety. The dog, a Labrador mix, reportedly barked until rescuers approached. Both were taken to a shelter, where the girl was quickly reunited with relatives. "We don't know how they survived," one firefighter said, but that dog never left her side. Authorities are calling it a small miracle amid widespread devastation. After the hurricane and widespread flooding along the southern coast, rescue teams found 17-year-old Lucas Reyes floating alone through a submerged neighborhood, clinging to the door of a refrigerator. His family's trailer had been swept away overnight. Using jumper cables, Reyes tied himself to the door and drifted for 16 hours through dark, debris-filled waters. "I just kept thinking I had to stay awake," he told medics. Cold, dehydrated, and covered in cuts, he was taken to a local hospital and is expected to recover fully. Emergency officials called his survival remarkable and credited his quick thinking under pressure. When the hurricane hit, 74-year-old Tom Delaney refused to leave his hilltop cabin. He reinforced the windows, tied himself to a structural beam with old climbing rope, and waited. Outside, winds tore shingles and trees from the ground. Inside, the house trembled, but held. "It was like standing in the path of a train for 5 hours," he said. When the storm passed, neighbors found him covered in dust, sipping cold coffee, and still strapped in. "Stubborn doesn't begin to cover it," his daughter joked. Officials warn others not to follow his example, despite the outcome. No one expected the tree to survive. It had stood in the town square for over a century, and as the storm hit, people watched it bend almost to the ground. The next morning, every building around it was damaged. Windows shattered, signs ripped off, but the tree still stood, stripped of leaves but upright. Someone tied a ribbon to its trunk. 2 days later, others added flowers, candles, handwritten notes. It became a quiet monument to the idea that some things, even in chaos, can hold fast. A firefighter swam across a flooded intersection carrying a life vest in his teeth. Inside the stranded SUV was a woman 9 months pregnant. Contractions already started. With help from neighbors, she was floated on an air mattress to dry ground, then rushed to a hospital. Her baby was born 2 hours later, healthy and strong. "He came into the world like a rescue mission," the father said. When the hurricane hit, 16-year-old Brianna lost nearly everything. Her family's home was badly damaged, and most of their belongings vanished in the wind. But 3 days later, a neighbor found her bright blue prom dress tangled in a tree 3 miles away, still intact. "It sounds silly," she said, "but it was the one thing that felt normal." Volunteers cleaned and restored it. Local businesses are now planning a community prom for displaced teens. "After everything we've lost," Brianna said, "this one dress being found made it feel like hope's still out there." In the rural outskirts of the county, two massive wind turbine blades snapped mid-storm, scattering fiberglass across nearby fields. Residents say the sound was like cannon fire. One farmer found a 12-foot shard embedded in his barn. It missed the cows by inches, he said. The turbines, rated for high winds, weren't meant to withstand the recorded 140 miles per hour gusts. No injuries were reported, but the incident reignited debate about wind energy infrastructure in hurricane-prone areas. Engineers have been dispatched to assess the remaining turbines for structural weakness. The morning after, children wandered the neighborhood, pointing out what had changed. "That tree wasn't broken before," one said. "That trampoline wasn't there." They turned it into a game, spot the difference, but the parents watched in silence, tallying lost cars, collapsed roofs, shredded fences. One boy found a soggy storybook in a ditch and began reading aloud, sitting cross-legged on the wet sidewalk. Others joined him. For a moment, no one remembered the night's terror, only the sound of a child's voice trying to bring a story back to life. Paramedics carried a boy with cerebral palsy down 4 flights of stairs after the elevator failed and rising water threatened the building. His wheelchair was damaged, but they improvised with a rolling dolly and straps. "They didn't hesitate," said his mother. "They treated him like family." The family was later airlifted to a shelter equipped for medical needs. Three fishermen who stayed aboard their boat during the storm are missing. The vessel's GPS last pinged 2 miles offshore before signals were lost. Debris believed to be from the boat washed ashore Sunday. Search efforts continue by air and sea, though officials say conditions are challenging. The families are urging anyone with information to contact authorities. After the storm, a cross made of driftwood was discovered lodged upright in a sand dune where dozens had sought shelter. Locals have since preserved it as a symbol. "It felt like he marked the place where we were saved," said one evacuee. "We'll never move it." Preliminary assessments show that nearly 70% of homes and buildings in the coastal counties sustained wind-related damage during the recent hurricane. Over 40 mobile homes were completely overturned, and at least 12 commercial structures lost significant portions of their roofs. Utility poles were snapped along 19 major roads, and wind gusts were measured up to 129 miles per hour in some areas. Officials noted that older buildings were disproportionately affected. Insurance teams have begun documenting losses, with early estimates in the hundreds of millions. Emergency shelters remain at capacity as debris removal continues. Coast Guard crews rescued 27 people from rooftops in one suburb alone. High water